Hey, how's it going? Welcome back to the Football Diary podcast on the first weekend of the new Premier League season. Great to be back, Myles, isn't it? Amazing to see so many quality games in action. Not only that, but fans filling stadiums for the first time since, March 2020. So, yeah, loads to see and pick through and loads of positives as well for football fans, whatever allegiance you've got, really. So, I'm really excited to talk about this with you because there's so many entertaining points to talk through. Obviously, as a Villa fan, we'll get on that in a moment. It's been a disappointing every weekend, but if you're a Tottenham fan, loads to be cheerful about. We were doom and gloom about Spurs, but for me, them beating Man City 1-0, that's got to be the headline of the weekend, surely. What a great result.
Yeah, really, really good result for Spurs, and not one that I think anyone would have anticipated, particularly with the circus that surrounded it when it turned out that Kane wasn't in the matchday squad, which really isn't that surprising because you can't imagine his head would have been in the right place for it anyway, particularly with it being City. But also, he only reported back to training a couple of days ago. So whether his fitness was there or not, he's not played any pre-season for Spurs. So I don't think we can read too much into the fact that he wasn't there for this game. But wonderful result for Spurs. And actually, I think on the surface of it, deserved. I know City probably were the more attacking of the two sides and controlled the possession a little bit at times, but I definitely think Spurs did enough to get the win.
Yeah, I think so. I think with Son spearheading the attack, I think he showed how much of a world-class player he is. He was fantastic. And I was intrigued to see how a team from Nuno Espirito Santo would set up, especially that collection of players he's got with Spurs. And they centred it all around Son, didn't they? Dele Alli played an important part. Højbjerg played a really good part in the centre. Their counter with Lucas Moura was fantastic as well. I think they really surprised a few people, but City made it hard for themselves, didn't they? They had chances, like you said. And I don't want to state the glaringly obvious, but they had nobody there to finish them off, did they? There was no focal point for all the chances they created. So was it just the lack of a striker for Man City that was there undoing? What did you see?
No, I think City got a lot wrong, actually, and they just didn't really seem ready for the game. The setup was really interesting. Obviously, they tried to play with two number 8s, basically, and play with Jack kind of supporting Sterling on one side and Gundogan supporting Mahrez on the other, and every now and again they'd rotate. But that's not going to be enough for you in front of goal necessarily. And Ferran Torres was quite quiet as well. He's not a very physical presence up front. But to me, that it was lost at fullback. You know that Man City have spent a lot of money on fullbacks over the last few years, and Benjamin Mendy is definitely one of the more expensive acquisitions that they've had. But he was very poor to me, and Spurs seemed set up ready for it. I was interested to see the Spurs set up purely because Nuno has always played with 3 centre-backs at Wolves. He's always played a back 5. And he played a back 4 with Eric Dyer in the middle of it. I don't think anyone would have guessed that would have been the case. And I'm sure Dyer probably won't play once the new signing Romero is up to scratch. But it was interesting to see the setup was a back 4. And Spurs actually handled City really well. If you notice their front 3, first of all, they are designed for counter-attacking football. If you're going to play with Bergwijn, Son and Moura, the pace there is frightening. Yeah. And particularly when you've got someone like Fernandinho trying to cover the defence as well. The pace is gonna get you places, and it did. We saw it happen. Bergwijn could have doubled the lead at one point as well from exactly the same sort of counter. But more, what that front 3 did really well was isolate the players in the middle. Dele Alli tracked back very well and covered either Grealish or Gundogan, whilst Højbjerg and Skip covered the other side of the attack. And the front 3 pressed down the middle, allowing the fullbacks to get forward. That seems dangerous when you play City to let the fullbacks go forward. But when Benjamin Mendy was playing like he did, actually what it did was allow space to break into. And all of a sudden, Spurs' front 3 only had to worry about Diaz and Ake. And Nathan Ake is not a Man City player, is he? He's not that quality. So I think Spurs played it really well.
Half of their back 4 were really poor. So obviously you mentioned Mendy, you mentioned Ake. Ruben Diaz I felt kind of sorry for because he wasn't shielded at all by Fernandinho. I don't know whether Rodri is the long-term replacement for him, but I do think they're going to invest a lot of money. They should probably look at a central midfielder, defensive-minded central midfielder, because their central defence really exposed. And for all the money they've spent, for the squad value they've got, to see 2 players lining up in their back 4 of the kind of caliber of Ake and Mendy was a bit of a surprise, really, and a bit of a shock. And I know Guardiola likes to milk these things and say, I had a poor, depleted squad, but the value of that team should have been enough, really, shouldn't it?
Well, I think they were missing John Stones, definitely. I think Zinchenko will probably play left back for most of the season as well.
I think so.
But Guardiola can't really feel that hard done by. I think I saw a stat saying that the starting 11's combined cost was 540 million, and there was another 350 million on the bench. Now that's a lot. That's a ridiculous amount of money to spend on a squad, and they've not really highlighted the targeted the areas that they need to. I said it in our prediction show that to me the most obvious things that Man City needed were a holding midfielder and a striker, and in this game their holding midfielder got overrun, and they didn't have a striker to convert any chances that they did create. I think their expected goals for the game was 2.11. But if you haven't got a finisher there, if you haven't got a Harry Kane, if you haven't got Sergio Aguero, I'm not surprised to see you not take that. Mahrez should have scored, definitely. Cancelo probably could have scored very early in the game. And then all of a sudden, it's a different result that we're talking about. But I think Spurs played very well. Their midfield was organised and efficient and did its job. Tanganga was brilliant. He's a very good defender, Tanganga is. I think he'll have a very good career, actually. And even likes of Dele Alli and Eric Dyer, who seem to be completely bereft of any confidence and seem to be the past for Spurs, really. I was saying that I thought that Spurs might let Dele Alli go and Villa should be looking at him. Well, it looks like Nuno's going to have him as a key player, and so he should. He's a fantastic footballer. So, yeah, I think Spurs can take some confidence from it, but it's only the first game. It's always hard to tell. City did make it easier for them than maybe they should have.
Yeah, I think a few surprises there from Tottenham, especially. Like you were saying in the preview show that we did for the season, we worried for them. We really did. It all depended on how Nuno would adapt to a system without Kane, and I think it's fair to say he got it pretty spot on, didn't he? In the game against City. So fair play. It bodes well for them going forward. But whether they've got a squad deep enough to sort of rotate if Son gets injured and Kane gets sold is yet to be seen. So a few question marks about their squad depth, definitely.
Well, they've obviously got that new sporting director and head of recruitment in. The talk is that if Kane goes, they'll be raiding Serie A. So there's still talk of them being linked with Lautaro Martinez. I can't see that happening now that Inter have sold Lukaku. They have brought Dzeko in at Inter. So maybe they'd consider it again. But Lautaro Martinez is definitely their number one target. They're also looking at a few more players in the league. They're going to raid Fiorentina for a couple of their key players as well. So that depth might follow if they get the money in for Kane. Now, the talk is that City are going to bid 120 to 130 million this week, apparently. I wonder whether this result has done much to highlight to either team that would be good business. Whether City might look at it and go, we definitely need Kane. And whether Spurs might look at it and go, maybe we don't. Maybe we need the money. Because it's not necessarily, I know this is going to sound like an odd thing to say, and maybe I'm just saying this as a Villa fan who's had to see it happen to his club. It's not necessarily the worst thing for your squad to sell your best player if you reinvest that money wisely and pad the squad out in a better way. Do we trust Spurs to do that is the question.
Do we trust them with the transfer deadline fast approaching as well to spend that money wisely? Definitely not.
If a deal's going to be done, it's got to be done soon.
Yeah, definitely. I can't see him moving in January at all. So it is kind of now or never, isn't it? But yeah, fair play Spurs. Interesting Manchester City setup really and how they dealt with it or didn't deal with it. And Jack Grealish as well playing his first full start for City as well. What did you make of his positioning, his performance? Tanganga did really well against him pretty much, as you said. He dealt with the threat really well. A lot of criticism already has been thrown at Jack Grealish for the price tag. It's not his fault, clearly. How do you think he did?
That's always going to happen, isn't it? When you've seen it with every player that's ever gone with a big price tag, that their first game, all of a sudden, they're an absolute flop. I don't think you can judge much on Grealish's performance. But again, I said this at the time, signing Grealish without signing Kane doesn't make sense because Grealish is a very creative player. If you look at the amount of chances he's created in the Premier League since being promoted with Villa, it's absolutely frightening numbers. if you haven't got anyone in the middle to take those chances, what's the point? So it just looked a lot of the time like Grealish didn't really know what his purpose was. He's not quite in a far enough forward position to be taking the chances himself constantly. And he's also not really got anyone to provide. I like the idea of him kind of playing on that left-sided attacking midfield and swapping with Sterling every now and again, doubling up on the fullback. That makes sense.
Yeah.
I think he'll be strong there. But Tanganga had a great game. I think it's early days. He's not had that long training with that team. De Bruyne was missing. Foden was missing. So there are definitely players who will help bring the best out in Grealish given time. And if they can get a number 9, I think it's a lot easier to judge his performances then, really.
Yeah. So question marks more for City, I'd say, than for Spurs. But generally, a great result for Spurs to start the season. Another great result to start the season for Brentford fans, anyway, is a great 2-0 victory against Arsenal. They set up in a way that I think anyone who's seen Brentford play in the Championship recently is not surprised by. But Arsenal appeared to be surprised by the system they employed. And it stung them badly, didn't it? Fair play to Brentford for playing that system so well still against Premier League opposition. What did you make of the setup of Arsenal, first of all? And can you see Brentford being successful with the way they play against other big teams?
Arsenal. I feel like the stress that Arsenal fans feel, I almost feel myself now because I have a more vested interest in them. But they were dreadful. I feel for them to an extent because obviously last minute they lost out on Lacazette and Aubameyang, which would make a difference to their front line in the way that their front line press, definitely. Saka obviously isn't fully fit yet, so he couldn't play. Smith Rowe had a good game. Ben White looks like he's already an Arsenal player, but I'm not sure that's something he'd want to be, sadly. It's a very poor Arsenal side. When you looked at that 11, who are you inspired by in that starting 11? Absolutely no one. There's not one player on that team sheet that I looked at and thought, that's a world-class player. And Arsenal, the kind of size of club Arsenal are, and the history they have and the success they've had over recent years, for them to line up and for you to not recognise one player there is even close to being world-class. I wouldn't say any of those players are even Champions League class. None of them.
Wow. Okay.
Am I wrong when you look at that starting 11? Kieran Tierney. Kieran Tierney is probably the one player who started that game that you think he's a very good footballer. Other than that, there's a lot of young players who've got to prove themselves and will definitely have good careers. But the Premier League is here and now. You've got to win games now. And that squad was just not good enough. They defended shambolically. The thing that Brentford did so well was they had urgency in what they were doing. So that was whether they were attacking or defending. They pressed Arsenal's backline heavy. And you saw it because Arsenal had a rushed clearance that led to the first goal. And then for the long throw-in, the organisation was just shocking. But Brentford were all over them. It didn't surprise me that it was a Brentford player that got to that second ball because Arsenal just didn't know how to react. Every time Arsenal wanted to play it out from the back, Brentford seemed to rob the ball off of them. I lost count of how many times Xhaka was closed down by someone behind him and he didn't even know they were there. Whereas then, when it was the other way around and Brentford had the ball at the back, they did play their way out from the back because Arsenal didn't press them properly. It was either Smith Rowe on his own pressing, which is never enough, or they kind of press within 5 yards rather than getting tight. So it gave Brentford the space to play some beautiful football. I was really impressed by Brentford and the way they passed their way through the middle in particular.
Well, that's the key, though. They had so much space, and Arsenal were just sloppy with the ball, sloppy without the ball. Positioning was all over the place. And to be caught out by a Championship promoted side that badly on the opening day and to not prepare for that system, it's Arteta, isn't it, really? He's got to be at fault because you could have made that group of players set up well enough to kind of counter that threat. And there was no sort of hint that he was trying to do that. And he knew the threat that Ivan Toney posed. He's not been a secret weapon at all. He's been, a fantastic player in the Championship, and he played really well. He bullied the Arsenal backline. So there's no surprises there, but they seemed really surprised. And I think Arsenal have got a very tough season ahead of them. Where they finish this season is anyone's guess, but I can't see them progressing beyond what they did last year, mid-table. It looks like a difficult season for them. And as an Arsenal fan, like you say, it must be really difficult to watch the decline of your team because They were good as recently as 5 seasons ago, I would say. Quite a long time in football these days, but in the grand scheme of things, it's not that long at all. But they've declined so rapidly, haven't they?
Well, Arteta will be gone by Christmas. I'm pretty confident of that now, because there's just not enough to suggest that he's going to get them out of this. I wonder where the investment is coming this summer, because Ben White for 50 million is one signing on its own. Lokonga looked okay. He looked all right. I'm sure he'll prove to be a decent enough player. But there's just so... Arteta shouldn't be trying to pick a squad that struggles to find quality like that. Now, that being said, you'd still say it had more quality on paper than that Brentford squad does. But Brentford seemed to play like a team. They knew each other. They knew how to play around each other. Sergio Canos had a great game. I thought he was brilliant. And his goal was so well took. Like you say, Ivan Toney he bullied the Arsenal back line. That is not what you want to see from Pablo Mari, who I think a lot of Arsenal fans have put a lot of faith into because he had time out and stuff. And everyone sort of said, he'll be the one. When he comes in, he's a good player. He's 6'4". He's a big enough lad. Ivan Toney bossed him the entire game. And Ben White, I hope we see better from Ben White than that, because he had a very poor game.
He looked like a stranger in that defence, though. None of the defence looked like they were communicating at all.
No,
and like you
not
said,
at all.
For the second goal, I think it was the second goal where nobody hit the ball. It was a long throw-in, bounced in the area, and the Brentford player just came in and headed it. Nobody dealt with it, although you could, clutching at straws, maybe say that Leno was maybe fouled for that. I don't know if you've seen the replays, but
I did think that at the time, actually. I thought at the time it looked a bit like a foul, because it did look like the Brentford player had his arm. I think it was it Janssen? His arm around it.
He had both his arms around him, I think. It's like a double arm lock. It didn't look too great, but they should have dealt with it. Like, it was a long throw. It was such a direct goal, you know. Ben White was just ball watching. It was embarrassing to watch for them, really. But fair play to Brentford. What a great introduction to the Premier League. I'm so glad they were the first game of the weekend.
Oh, that was brilliant.
Yeah.
And the other thing about the Brentford game that was so enjoyable was seeing the fans back in stadium for the first time in a full stadium is great. But seeing it be the Brentford fans as well, who will never have seen their team in the Premier League. And I thought it was really sweet the way that the players and the manager interacted with the fans afterwards as well. Like, it's not a corny lap of honour because, oh, look how brilliant we are because of that 3 points. I think it was more, look, we're back and you're back. And it was an appreciation rather than a celebration in some ways. And Thomas Frank seems like a very likeable character. Very fashionable as well. He had some good trainers on, I noticed, on the touchline. I noticed that. But no, the difference was Brentford played with a style and a tactic and a purpose. Arsenal seemed to go, we'll give Smith Rowe the ball and hope he can create something. Smith Rowe is a good player, but I've said it on here before. He's not to the standard of someone who can carry your whole team. He's just not. He doesn't have enough of an end product yet for him to be that much of a focal point. He needs some support. He can do a lot of good, definitely, but he needs the likes of Saka. He needs maybe Lacazette or even Aubameyang if he can get his form back. Or they need someone else. There was talk of Aouar earlier in the window, and that went quiet.
Where would he go?
If they can go and get him, though, they need to throw whatever money it takes, because they clearly missed some discipline, some creativity, anything from the midfield. Xhaka has just signed another 1-year deal. He's signing a 1-year extension today. I thought they were getting rid of him. I'm glad, because it means he's not going to Roma. And I was a bit like, not sure how that will go, but I think
he's become the symbol, hasn't he? Xhaka's become the symbol of everything that's wrong with Arsenal's approach. And you know what, Smith Rowe, I feel for the guy, because on his young shoulders, there's been a lot of expectation already placed on them. And that's not fair on him. I mean, you could say that the returning players for Arsenal will make a difference against the way they play. It adds a massive extra layer of class to their first 11. But I haven't got the confidence in Arteta, and I don't think many Arsenal fans have, to turn that first 11 into a cohesive team. Certainly nothing like we've seen from the Brentford team, who were just fantastic on the day.
If you ask, how do Arsenal play football now? Let's say Arsenal had their strongest 11 available. What's Arsenal's style of play these days? It used to be very obvious what Arsenal's style of play was, and they were brilliant for it. Fast, quick transitions, quick passing football that was good to watch. I don't know what it is now. The problem is they've become a bit of a like Carragher kept saying, "Oh, this is the most Arsenal thing you'll see." He was mugging them off after 60 minutes. It was just let's batter Arsenal now. But they were really, really poor. I think that was not the game they wanted to lose. I think they've got City and Chelsea next as well. And all of a sudden you're 3 games in with 0 points. And that's not a position anyone wants to be in. Definitely not.
No, that's pressure, I think, on Arteta that he really could do without. He needs to get a result in one of them games and have an influence on them as well, on those 2 teams, because they are so far away from even top 6, I think. Looking at the quality of some of the other teams in the sort of upper reaches of the Premier League that aren't the top 4, they're going to find it hard to get anywhere near the top 6 at the minute, which is, again, weird to say for a second season in a row to finish outside of the top 6 would be... for Arsenal, pretty much a sign of where they are now.
That's 3rd season in a row.
Is it the 3rd? That's it. Then,
it would be. I honestly, I look at that squad though, and it's mid-table quality. It is. There are a couple of players that might be exceptions to that. If Aubameyang can hit form, then he's definitely a class player to have around. And like I say about Kieran Tierney, maybe Thomas Partey, although we've not seen enough of him at Arsenal to prove that. Other than that, it's a mid-table squad. It is. Yeah,
I agree. I'm going to move on to something equally as depressing to talk about. So, can we address Villa? So, Watford 3, Aston Villa 2. I mean, Watford ran away with it at the start, didn't they? The first half was awful to watch if you're a Villa fan, because defensively, they were so out of character for them. Their defence has been the thing that we've talked about as something that they've really thrived on having. And these England players that have come through, so Tyrone Mings, there's been talk of all the back 4 basically being called up for their national side, and they looked like a different set of players yesterday. Not yesterday, the weekend. But I mean, what do you make of that? Why are they looking sort of like such a different team? What made them look so unprepared for this Watford team? Because it was a surprise.
I think it was partly just, it's one of those things, first game of the season, they hadn't quite woken up properly yet. It was poor. It seemed to me, when I saw the 11 and that Ashley Young was playing left wing, I just assumed that was to double up on Ismail Assar, because obviously Young has spent a lot of time recently playing left back, and Ismail Assar is definitely Watford's best player. He was one of the best players in the Championship last season, and he was a fantastic player when he was in the Premier League last time. So it seemed to me that he'd picked a defensive left winger so that when Watford attacked, Targett would have some cover. Young didn't track back once in the first half, and they just targeted that side, pardon the pun, and just left Targett so isolated that he was just getting dragged out of position for the whole first half. Dennis would move over to that side as well and play there with Sarr, and they just passed their way around him, and cleverly as well, played really well actually, and kept finding the ball to Sarr that he needed. Now, every now and again, Mings would go out and support, and that would add something, but then you're empty in the middle. So the first half, they just got their organisation completely wrong. They needed someone to just track back. That was it. It was as simple as if Ashley Young could have just tracked 30 yards back every now and again and just picked Sarr up, we would have been a lot more comfortable. But Targett was having a really poor time of it, and he got subbed at half time. He's now already missed more minutes in the Premier League this season than he did the entirety of last season.
Crazy.
Which shows how bad a game he was having.
It was a bold call by Dean Smith, to be fair, to do that, but fair play to him for acknowledging the system wasn't working. So you have to take some sort of actual positives from that. But Watford were brilliant in the first half. Sarr was unplayable, wasn't he? I think every defender he comes up against will struggle. It won't just be a Matt Targett thing. It'll be a struggle for anybody, I think, the best of them. So I'm really keen to see how he progresses. Now, I put Brentford down as relegation candidates. You put Watford down as relegation candidates.
Yeah.
We're looking a bit stupid at the minute, aren't we? How have Watford got it so right? What are they doing so well?
I will say, Watford played well in the first half in terms of they broke with pace. They counter-attacked. Their counter-attack was strong. Sarr is a very good player. Now, their first 2 goals, you could argue both of them very fortunate. The first one, Dennis shoots, Konsa gets down well to block it, and it happens to fall straight back into his path. And he puts it so close to Martinez that Martinez can't quite get down in time. If Martinez goes with his feet, or Dennis puts it slightly further away, he saves it. The second goal is a horrible deflection. Like the ball is going along the floor, bounces off Mings and lobs Martinez. It's a difficult one. Their third goal even is just a wonderful strike, and he's done really well from it. I can't believe I'm going to say this, but once Villa went 3-0 down, they played really well again. Leon Bailey looked fantastic when he came on. I thought he was direct, he was quick. That was the other thing I thought about Villa. Watford showed you how to do it. They were counter-attacking with pace. Now, in the first half, their forward three behind Ings were Young, Buendia, and El Ghazi. El Ghazi's the quickest out of those three these days. Than an aging Ashley Young and Buendia, but even he's not very fast. So when we brought Leon Bailey on, it was a bit of pace, and also his passing is much better. So they dropped Ashley Young back to left back and put Bailey in front of him. That worked, played very, very well. They keep persevering with Jacob Ramsey as well, and I don't think he's ready yet. I think he's a season or two off. But Watford didn't do enough that I thought, they'll be fine. They'll stay up. I think Villa just let them in too often, and they got quite fortunate with some things. Not to take away from their performance. Like I say, I think Cleverley and Sarr played really well. But I do think as soon as it was 3-0, Villa woke up, and we nearly snatched a point. Towards the end, they were still going for it. So positives I'm taking. Bailey played really well when he came on. Ings is off the mark, even if it was a penalty. And hopefully it gives them all a bit of a wake up as to you need to sort this out. Watkins will be back, and that'll make a big difference. Bertrand Traore, when he came on, looked a lot better than El Ghazi, but he needs some fitness as well. It's not the end of the world for Villa. It was a bad result, and the first half was shocking to watch. But we'll see. I'm not taking too much from this game for either team.
No, I think you're right to sort of take them positives from it, especially because the biggest concern wasn't the attack and the creativity, which is what the fear was when Jack Grealish moved. It was the defence and the organisation and the cohesion between defence and the transition, really. So that's something to take. I think they can sort that out quite quickly. And I think they'll get a rocket at their backsides from Dean Smith, I think, this week before the next game, because that was out of character for them. So, I don't think any reason to worry if you're a Villa fan. But I think Watford were quite impressive. And I think we've got a couple of real class players in their team, which surprised me, really. I've not seen much of Sarr in the Championship, but he's looked like I'm surprised he's still there. I really am. I thought he'd be snapped up at that kind of quality. But no, they've done well to hang on to him, really.
Well, if you remember, last year, was it last year? I think it was last season. Yeah, it must have been. They did the whole thing with the transfer window ending on this date, but you could still sign players from Championship teams. And there was loads of talk in that window that Man United were going to go for Sarr because they'd missed out on Sancho. I think smartly, they just said, we'll wait a season and get the right man. But Sarr has been linked with a lot of clubs. Liverpool were linked. I think Spurs have been linked even recently. So he's on people's radar because he's a fantastic player. And he showed that his pace can be dangerous to Premier League defences not last season, the season before, and again Saturday. So we'll see with Watford. I still think that their squad lacks the kind of quality that they'll need. I don't think their defence is very strong. Dennis obviously started well, but has been inconsistent at other times in his career. He was on loan in Cologne last season, and I think he only scored 3 goals. So he's already scored a third of them in his debut. I don't know whether he's someone that they're going to rely on for the rest of the season. So we'll see with Watford. I'm not going to say I'm taking my prediction back. Definitely not.
No, I think Watford, like a few teams on opening day, are really riding the wave of just the fans being there. Do you know what I mean?
Definitely.
It's different to the energy and the dynamic of the way you play. And they definitely sort of showed that. I think Brentford did to an extent as well. So we'll see how they get on the road now, because away days will actually feel like away days. There'll be fans there to sort of make it feel more hostile. And we'll see how they get on.
I was just going to say, I think Watford have got Brighton next. And I think Brentford have got, I think it's Crystal Palace and then us. So there are points available if those teams can keep their form, definitely. Yeah. And that would be great for them to start that way. We were saying that it would be difficult for Arsenal to lose their first 3 games. Well, on the flip side of that, if you could win your first 3 games, you're in a great position for any club. So the promoted teams to do that would be fantastic.
I fear that if you fall away too soon at this stage of this season, I think it will make such a big difference as well, because there's not much between the bottom 10 teams, I don't think, from what we've seen so far. I think squad depth will play a major factor in the latter stages of the season. I think that's where the likes of Watford might come undone because, like you say, they do look pretty threadbare beyond the first 11, and even that's not really 100% Premier League class, is it? But a great start.
That Hernandez that came on, his goal was absolutely fantastic. He took it so well. Now, they've been waiting 4 years for him to make his debut. So if he can continue to produce like that, then they've got a really good player on their hands there. So we'll see about him as well. He's one to watch.
Good to know. And speaking of amazing goals, Man United 5, Leeds United 1 contained some absolute crackers, including Leeds goal from Alan as well, which was fantastic.
Yeah, lovely goal.
I've got loads to say about United because everything seemed to go right on the day, apart from the goal they conceded. But they presented Varane, which was a big lift and a really smart move, I think, from United to do that before the game. It really helped. Sancho got some minutes in the end of the game. And obviously Paul Pogba with 4 assists and Bruno Fernandes with a hat-trick. And the kind of performance from Mason Greenwood that just makes me think, is this the same player from last season? He looked so lively, so energetic, with such a direct mindset. And the front three just looked irresistible for United. I was really, for the first time in a while, optimistic about the strikers and the forwards and the way they played together in a team. And obviously, as a Man United fan, I'm slightly biased in saying that. But as a relative neutral, how did you see United's performance against Leeds?
Oh, they were outstanding. But I will say, Leeds is the perfect opponent for Man United, isn't it? The things that we know Man United are good at are hitting teams on the counter, creating chances from deep to pacey players to run onto. All Leeds are going to do is sit high up the pitch and let you do that. And it's shown in the last couple of games. He scored 6 against them last season.
Yeah.
So I wasn't surprised necessarily. But the good things to take from it were, obviously, Bruno had quite a quiet Euros, but just looked irresistible. How lethal he is in front of goal for a midfielder is outstanding. I think he's got more goal involvements in the league than any other player since he signed. He's a midfielder. He's not a striker. But the way he hits the ball is fantastic. Particularly I think it was his third.
Yeah, the third goal was superb.
Yeah, his third goal. The way he hit that was beautiful. And the composure he showed for his second even. He was brilliant. He had a very, very good game. And when you see Pogba on form like that as well, you're just desperate for him to sign that contract extension. I think they could have a really important season together, those two. And I think when you're talking about a team that's just scored 5 goals and you've still got Jadon Sancho and Marcus Rashford to come into the attack and Cavani, that's really encouraging. That's really, really encouraging.
Varane at the back as well, still to settle in. It's just so many positives to take from it. Having said that, Leeds, I think Bielsa's such a rigid stickler to his way of working, isn't he? And he's going to live and die by it, and he's definitely sort of been slaughtered by it on this occasion. But I thought they were good. I thought they were industrious. I thought they worked really hard, and they did what they always do and just pressed a lot. They were massively missing Calvin Phillips, I think. They were such a different team without him. And they had Robin Koch in the middle as well, and he just looked terrible. He just was out of his depth. He couldn't get the ball at all, and they just ran rings around him. And I think Phillips would have fared a lot better. So would it have stopped a 5-1 result? Probably not 5 goals, but I think they still would have got thumped by quite a convincing amount with Phillips in the side.
Leeds' midfield was really interesting because rather than try and play a system, they tried to play the man, didn't they? You notice that each one of their midfielders tried to press a certain Man United player. Now, all that did was allow space in behind them again. So when you're Man United and you want to counter-attack, that's perfect. Bruno Fernandes is going to back himself to beat any one of those Leeds midfielders that tries to press him. And he's going to do so successfully. So Bielsa got it wrong. Controversial opinion, Leeds are going to struggle this season. I do not think they will have a good season. A lot of people have gone, oh yeah, I forgot about Leeds. They'll be up there or thereabouts. Leeds could find themselves in a very difficult spot this year. I think you'll notice that teams will have started to figure them out a little bit. And that attacking style that they played with last year and that hell for leather will score 4 and concede 3. That's not going to last in the Premier League. They don't have the kind of quality to get them through that consistently. I think teams will work them out just as Man United clearly did. And I think we could see quite a difficult season for Leeds ahead, actually.
Wow. Yeah, I think when you look at the sort of calibre of teams in that middle to lower half of the table, the likes of sort of Brighton, for example, they don't look any better than Brighton, I don't think. I think they're going to be in and around the same position in the league, somewhere between sort of 12th and 17th. Do you know what I mean? Scrapping to get as high in the table as they can. I think by Leeds' standards that they set last season, that is a bit of a come down, isn't it? But I think that's more testament to the quality of the rest of the teams around them. They've kind of improved a little bit. I didn't see much of an improvement in the Leeds team at all.
No, not at all. Not at all.
Yeah.
And you're right, they obviously were missing Phillips, and that makes a big difference because he's a fantastic player. But again, Leeds haven't really done anything in the transfer market that makes me think they're going to pull up any trees. There's talk of them still going in for Adama Traore.
Okay.
But short of that, and that he is a perfect Leeds player, by the way. The kind of
picture him in that setup. Yeah, that would really work.
The energy he brings, the intensity that Leeds play with, that's fantastic. But I don't think they'll get him, to be honest, because he started for Wolves at the weekend, so he's clearly a part of their plan.
A bit as well. I think his value is probably too much for their kind of their fee might be too much for their resources. Really, that's punching above their weight.
I saw like 25 million being talked about. I thought he must be worth more than that to Wolves. Yeah. It must be.
He's a Spanish international now, isn't he? Yeah, definitely. Yeah, the Euros.
Yeah.
So difficult performance for Leeds, but United were absolutely sensational.
Yeah, brilliant.
And sit top of the table after one game. Always rubbish to say that, I think, because it doesn't mean anything at the end of the day, but it's nice to see nonetheless. And then moving on to the most entertaining game, I think, was Newcastle 2, West Ham 4. So goals galore. I thought Newcastle did well, actually. They started well, obviously took the lead. Callum Wilson was fantastic. He was supported really well by Sam Maximan, who again was at his creative best. It's such a strange player, isn't he? Because
he's brilliant.
He's brilliant to watch, but he's kind of kamikaze in his approach. He tries things, and I think as soon as the supply to him was cut off and West Ham got back into it, it was a different game. And I have to say, West Ham looked great with Rice in the middle. He was fantastic all game, Declan Rice. So fair play to the midfield setup for that. And I think Jared Bowen as well was one of those players that really stood out for me. I think both of those two will have a great season. But did you see much of the game? What did you make of the goals? It was a brilliant game to watch as a neutral.
Yeah, I think Sam Maximan is such a fantastic player to watch, isn't he? If I was the owner of any club or any manager right now, he'd be someone that I'd be looking at, because I think you probably could prize him away from Newcastle. He's brilliant, and Declan Rice did have a good game, but he seemed to struggle with Sam Maximan a couple of times, didn't he? The goal, he just turned Rice inside out for Wilson's goal. It was hilarious. But no, West Ham, they continue where they left off. They got the 3 points. They got the job done at the end of the day, and scoring 4 goals along the way is always nice for them as well. It took them a while to wake up maybe and get into the game, but once they did, fantastic. I think Ben Rama is in for a really interesting season. He he looks like he's starting to settle into that West Ham team now. And for him to get a goal early in the season will do wonders for his confidence. I'm glad that Antonio got his goal as well, because after not scoring the penalty, you imagine that would frustrate him. But he hit the ball so well as well. He's got a lovely strike on him, Antonio. Very funny guy as well, quite likeable. So he's one to watch this season.
Well, interesting stat for Antonio. He's now the joint record Premier League goal scorer with Paolo Di Canio.
Really?
Which is a crazy stat, because that shows how few goals they've scored over the last 15, 20 years. So
that's not.
Yeah, he's now their joint Premier League goal scorer. So Antonio's a pivotal player for them, isn't he?
Well, it's funny when you think that over the last few years they signed Haller and that didn't work out. They had Arnautovic for a while. They've kind of been looking for that number 9 for ages. Not really seen them linked with too many number 9s this summer. Every summer it seems to be, what striker are West Ham going to try and sign? And they were linked with Tammy Abraham for a little bit, who I want to mention quickly in a minute if you'll allow. But other than that, it's just been Antonio, because he's just proved, look, he was a right back a few years ago. When he was at Forest, he played right back. He moved further forward for West Ham, and now he's a striker all of a sudden. He's brilliant. I really like Antonio. I think he's a good player.
He's so versatile. I think that's just the way he plays. It's just all action, isn't he? He could literally, any attacking position, he could try and attempt. I think he's been tried in quite a few positions across the front line over his time with West Ham and proved really successful, hasn't he? Scored plenty of goals. So, weird one. Tammy Abraham, go on then. What were you going to say about him? Because I think I've got an idea.
So my quick Serie A minute, because the league's not started yet. But very exciting news is that Tammy Abraham apparently today has agreed his personal terms as well and completed his medical for a move to Roma. I love that.
Amazing.
If he's not going to come to Villa, that's perfect for me. I think that will really suit him to get away from England for a little while, learn a bit more about his game in a more culture of football environment at a very, very big club under Mourinho as well, who loves to have a striker at the heart of his team. Now, anywhere Mourinho has been, you can criticize him for falling out with X, Y, Z, but he's always had that striker that he depends on, whether it be Zlatan, Drogba, even Kane at Spurs. If Abraham can be that figure, and now Edin Dzeko's gone, it would definitely be him. That's fantastic for his development too. So I'd be really interested to see what Abraham can do in Serie A. I think the league suits him. I think he'll do very, very well there. And I think it's a fantastic signal of intent from Roma as well. A young English player spending about 35-40 million on him. Brilliant.
Yeah. I think there's
Chelsea
a
big
buyback
in as well.
Yeah, there's a big buyback clause for him because I think Chelsea recognised that he could have a good couple of years there, and suddenly the value might increase well beyond the buyout clause, to be fair, because he's one of them players, I think, who could catch fire quite quickly in Serie A. Like you said, he looks like he's made for the league and for a Mourinho team as well. And if that's the case, I think he'll definitely get a shot with England as well. So
I hope so. Do you know what? If we hadn't signed Ings, I would have killed to have Tammy Abraham back at Villa. Yeah. He's a fantastic number 9. He loves scoring goals, and that's what you want from your number 9. He's clinical. He knows where the goal is. He's very composed. He's got pace. I can see him shoot with either foot. I like Tammy Abraham a lot, and I think he'll do a very good job at Roma. So great signing if they can get that one over the line.
Thank you for your Italian football minute. A bit more than a minute, but always necessary for Italian fans. To be honest, the rest of the Premier League, I'm just going to go through some of the scores now. If you want to sort of pick out your highlights from the rest, really. So Burnley 1, Brighton 2, Brighton coming from behind to win that one. Chelsea 3, Crystal Palace 0. I don't think there's any surprises there particularly. Everton coming from behind to win 3-1 against Southampton in Rafa Benitez's first Premier League game in charge of them. Leicester beating Wolves 1-0. Norwich 0, Liverpool 3. And we've talked about everything else anyway. So they're the ones that we've not talked about. Anything stand out for you there? Anything of note that you've noticed?
The main thing that stands out to me there is how many meh teams and results there are in the Premier League this season already. Like Everton this season. Who cares? Honestly, who's going to care about Everton this season? I don't think Everton fans. Southampton. We forgot about Southampton a little bit, I think. When we were doing our predictions for who's going to go down, Southampton, they could be in a lot of trouble, you know. If Villa can take Ward-Prowse off Southampton, then they're stuffed. Who cares about them, really? Brighton, Burnley. Do you know what I mean? The only ones that I think you can look at are, obviously, Liverpool looks strong again. It's nice for them to get their season off to a good start. And the stat about Salah scoring the last 5 opening days in a row. It's incredible. Yeah, I didn't even realise he'd been at Liverpool that long, to be honest.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's crazy.
Sounds a long time.
Yeah, but no, what a stat that is. But yeah, I thought Liverpool, they looked just a lot more solid with the returning players. I mean, Matip and Van Dijk at the back made such a difference to them. I think psychologically more than anything else. I still think Liverpool's midfield looks pretty light. Makes me wonder why they let Wijnaldum's contract run down, because they've still got James Milner in the middle, and like he's not got the legs.
I couldn't believe that.
Yeah.
The midfield was the midfield Keita, Milner, and Oxlade-Chamberlain.
Yeah, which is
that is not a midfield that you imagine would start for him.
Yeah,
bizarre.
And I've seen Jurgen Klopp already sort of comparing spending of the other teams and saying we spend within our means, and I don't know what they're doing, but that's what we're going to continue to do. A bit of a salty remark, almost getting his excuses in early, but it looks like they've got no money to spend, doesn't it? Really?
Yeah.
So I don't know.
Do you know who says that?
So,
do you know who says that? Broke clubs. Yeah, and Liverpool are in some financial trouble at the moment, so that doesn't surprise me. Other than that, the only other result that I think is worth mentioning is Chelsea, purely because I think it showed the frailty of Crystal Palace. They looked really, really poor. I don't even think they touched the ball in Chelsea's box in the first half.
They were no threat at all, were they?
They're going to struggle. But Chelsea scored 3 goals. Now, Chelsea got wins at the end of last season, but they didn't score many goals. So for them to get 3 goals before Lukaku comes in is really good for them. There was no Havertz. no Lukaku yet,
Yeah.
no Ziyech. So it just shows how much attacking talent Chelsea do have. I'm really interested to see how Lukaku gets on at Chelsea. I said it when we were doing our previews the other week, and we didn't manage to use it. But Lukaku will have a very interesting season, be very influential. But I think it will be in a different way to people expect it to be. I don't think he's going to be.
Actually. I think he's going to be more of a back-to-goal sort of striker now, because I think Tuchel hinted at it in his pre-season sort of conversations about where Lukaku would sit. And I think he sees him as a support player for the likes of Havertz to run off him.
Definitely.
Which is incredible considering he was such a prolific goal scorer in Serie A.
Yeah. Should not do that, because he's so much better when he can run at some defenders, and he's so much better these days at facing the goal. He's a much better player than the one that left England a few years ago. So when Tuchel said, well, Giroud's gone, so we need someone who can play with their back to goal, I don't really want to see that be Lukaku. I want to see him being that strong, quick, clever footballer who's going to run and challenge defenders. The other thing that I think will take away from his goal tally is Jorginho is still going to take penalties. So I'll be interested to see how Lukaku gets on goal-wise this season. But I think he'll be a great signing. But the fact that Chelsea are already off the mark like that, look, there's a title race this season, definitely. You could say, realistically, that City, Chelsea, United and Liverpool will all try and compete for the title. City have already dropped 3 points on those teams. Now, obviously, after game week 1, you're not going to go, well, that's them out of the title race. I think there was something like 10th in November last year or something ridiculous.
Yeah, it'll be a different story this time, though. Like you said, there's so much competition. If you fall behind even in the title race early on, it's going to be really hard to make those points back. So I think the games against each other will be sort of fascinating to see. I hope it's not a stalemate in every game, and I hope they're all sort of goal fests. But I fear it will probably be a pretty turgid affair when they do come up against each other. But fascinating for everybody else. I'm looking to see an actual title race, because I think most leagues in Europe now are quite closed off. It's 1 or 2 teams still. The Premier League looks competitive again, which is great.
Yeah. But not the best start for our prediction of Havertz as player of the year that he didn't even start. But, is what it is.
Well, that was a gamble, wasn't it? Because of the talent they've got. So we knew that was going to be the case.
I love that we both took that.
I know. I agree with what you say about Lukaku, though. It would be a shame to see him be a support player as opposed to the main threat. He maybe will mix it up a bit and change the way the front three play with each other and make them kind of interchangeable in some way. Because Lukaku, often for United, came in from wide and supported the central striker. So maybe he'll do something like that with him. I don't know. But yeah, if he's not top scorer next season now, I'm going to look really stupid, because all of my predictions are already coming undone. That's why I don't play fantasy football, Myles.
I did okay at fantasy football this week. I'm not top of all my leagues, unfortunately. Only one of them. But it's early days.
That's it. We've exhausted all of the Premier League now anyway. So thanks for your time, mate. There's a few European games I think can qualify us to go in midweek, but that's it until Saturday, isn't it? It's all back to Saturday, Sunday again. Yeah. Which, after the year we've had of COVID football every day, it feels like. That Saturday, Sunday structure again is going to be quite nice, isn't it? So,
do you know what? I am. During last season, because of how much football was on TV, I paid for a Now TV like sports pass so I could watch all the games. Because I've got the BT login and then I've got Sky. Brilliant. I've cancelled it now because I'm like, I'm not going to pay the same amount of money to watch one game a week on Sky. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, it's a bit more normality, I think, now. I'm seeing fans kind of confirm that, and it feels like Match of the Day's an event again, because you can hear the crowd noise and it's not all fabricated. Yeah. I don't have to switch to the different Sky channel to get rid of that fake crowd noise, because that was just rubbish, wasn't it? So
yeah, I did the same. I hated it.
Awful. But yeah, amazing weekend. Great to be back. Great to be in the Premier League to be back. And yeah, happy days, really. Good news for Villa to hopefully turn it around next time we talk. Fingers crossed. We'll see some positives there. But until then, mate, enjoy, and I'll speak to you soon. Cheers.
See you later.
See you later.